believe that right now we are in a position where the 2020 election will be hacked?
Oh, without question.
There's nothing secure about the Dominion voting gear.
Many of the features of Dominion that are being characterized as glitches are actually designed features to help people manipulate the results of the election.
A month before the 2020 election, the parent company of Dominion Voting Systems received $400 million in funding.
Instead of running towards the light of honesty and integrity, Dominion Voting Systems retreated to the darkness.
Where are the facts? Is there any truth behind these allegations? We have to find out.
The world must prepare for a potential pandemic.
Called the surge a humanitarian
More
disaster.
than 3 million of us have already voted.
The year 2020. A most unusual year. It started with a global pandemic caused by the CCP virus, and its conclusion is with the US election, with all eyes of the world watching closely. The CCP and the United States have become the key players, and they are polar opposites. My name is Joshua Phillip. I'm an investigative reporter for the Epoch Times in New York. In April this year, we released our documentary investigating the origins of the CCP virus that was watched by over 100 million people. Every day since then, I've been following the CCP virus on its path of terror, as well as other related events that have rocked the world, like the Hong Kong national security law, in the Chinese Communist Party, China-India conflicts, South China Sea disputes, and the Taiwan Strait crisis. I'll be doing again these live Q&As. My schedule, now packed with daily live shows and even more interviews, has just had to keep up with this unusual year. Then election season hit. The 59th U.S. presidential election garnered a historic turnout from the American people. Compared to the last election in 2016, 20 million more votes were counted. Emotions were high. We've never seen anything like it. On November 3rd, the thrill of election night, which only comes once every 4 years, was upon us. Yet after midnight, no clear victory celebration was in sight. Counting in key swing states paused. Donald Trump's campaign announced it would demand a stop on tallying ballots and take legal proceedings all the way to an appeal at the Supreme Court. And then, almost unanimously, mainstream media ignored the pending legal challenges and 4 days later declared Joe Biden the winner.
We've reached a historic moment in this election. We can now project
that former Vice President Joe Biden has been elected president.
And if that wasn't unusual enough, the most startling allegations, reports of irregularities at voting sites, began to surface.
What was disturbing?
We just want a fair election.
I felt insidious fraud going on. I felt that
the allegations were not only questioning the fairness of the voting process, but even suggested possible fraud of stealing the election. The U.S. is a beacon of freedom and democracy. The integrity of the U.S. election impacts not only the future of the United States, but that of the entire world. Where are the facts? Is there any truth behind these allegations? Is the election indeed being stolen? We have to dig in. We have to find out. On November 3rd, 2020, I didn't host my usual program. Instead, like so many Americans who care about the future of our country, I was closely watching the election results in real time, live on air with the Epoch Times' sister media, NTD Television, during their election night coverage.
2020 has been kind of the year of unpredictability.
And by midnight, Trump and Biden had won their expected strongholds. Trump had won the key swing state of Florida, which has 29 electoral college votes.
If the trajectories don't change, Trump looks like he has a pretty strong victory.
Trump is so far ahead right now, it seems Biden doesn't have enough room to grow in terms of electoral votes.
Then something unexpected happened.
It does seem that the results are just frozen, too. There's nothing new is being declared right now.
Counters have gone to bed.
Yeah, no, it does seem that way, actually.
The swing states where Trump was holding a lead, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, they suspended their vote count or postponed counting mail-in ballots, and it happened almost simultaneously. This inevitably delayed the final result. Then just after midnight, at 12:49 a.m., Trump sent a tweet. And then around 2 a.m., he appeared at the White House to proclaim an impending victory and to announce that his campaign would take the election fight to the Supreme Court.
We want the law to be used in a proper manner. So we'll be going to the U.S. Supreme Court. We want all voting to stop. We don't want them to find any ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning and add them to the list.
He's suggesting there was fraud that took place, that the American people were defrauded by changes possibly made to the election system. This is going to go to the Supreme Court. We'll have to see whether these ballots are counted, the ones that are still pending, presumably. We'll have to see whether election fraud took place, as Trump seems to be alleging here.
At 4 a.m. on November 4th, exhausted spectators were in a deep slumber, and America was in the pitch black of night. But the sun came up with another surprise. Trump's lead in several key swing states had disappeared.
I've flipped on the news earlier this morning. We started looking like it's going more Biden.
And what was more unusual was that Wisconsin and Michigan had resumed counting around 4 a.m. and 6 a.m. And both states showed a sudden spike in votes, over 100,000 votes in each state, nearly all for Biden. It wasn't long before Biden's large deficit behind Trump became a small but sustained lead, which was declared a Biden victory by most mainstream media on November 7th, even though no state had certified its results and no electors had been appointed.
The election hasn't officially ended, but the Trump campaign says they're suing in a number of states, which could potentially change the election results we have now.
Second by second, I had watched the voting data come in on election night, and the count that came in on the morning of November 4th just didn't add up. What exactly happened before dawn on November 4th? Not a single news agency provided an explanation, and the opinions portrayed by the public on social media and the announcers on mainstream media were in huge opposition.
There is no evidence that
President refusing to concede the election, repeating his baseless claims that the election was a fraud.
How are they impacting people there in Georgia who have another runoff election to look forward to?
In violations of Michigan election law.
Meanwhile, at the White House, President Trump spent his holiday continuing to push baseless claims about voter fraud.
It's certainly not easy to separate fact from fiction when it comes to allegations of election fraud, but it is clear, especially with the ongoing legal process, that the mainstream media prematurely declared Biden the winner.
NBC News now projects that Joe Biden won the
presidential election.
Without investigating it themselves, they hastily denied any fraudulent activity in this election, which had a historic turnout. I have to ask, where is the independence, the objectivity, and the professionalism that we expect from the news media? The New York Times sources its voting data from Edison Research. Edison receives real-time election data from each state office directly, including from voting systems. Analyzing this data, I calculated the percentage of votes obtained by Trump and Biden against the total votes counted. And I found that on November 4th, within 7 seconds, after 6:31 a.m., Michigan saw a sudden influx of 149,722 votes, of which 141,258 votes, or 94.3%, were for Biden. Only 4% were for Trump. This abnormal spike in votes directly resulted in Biden closing the gap in Michigan and then overtaking Trump. Checking the New York Times election database, I saw Wisconsin also displayed similar abnormalities. During the 5 minutes between 3:37 and 3:42 a.m. local time, 168,386 votes were tallied, of which 143,379, or 85%, were for Biden, and 25,163, or 14.9%, were for Trump. Before that 5 minutes, Trump had always been in the lead. This abnormality reversed the situation in Wisconsin and gave Biden the lead. In the currently contested Wisconsin results, Biden leads Trump by only 20,608 votes. Yet at 3:42 a.m. on November 4th, Biden received a peculiar influx of 143,379 votes. More swing states, such as Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Arizona, all had similar anomalies in their election vote count. Yet despite these abnormal statistics surfacing one after another, the mainstream media have continued to present only one-sided interpretations that clearly favor Biden. The gap between reports of mainstream media and the actual data really puzzles me. But what is even more puzzling is the difference between the number of votes received by Biden versus the Senate Democratic candidates. According to a Pew Research Center survey, a significant majority of Trump and Biden supporters indicated that they will vote for the Senate candidate of the same party. And the results from the traditionally blue Democratic states and the Republican states in this election certainly confirmed the survey results. In the non-swing states of Maine, Delaware, South Dakota, and Wyoming, Trump and Biden's votes are not equal to those of senator candidates from their respective parties, but the gap is small in comparison. However, in swing states, Biden's vote count far eclipsed that of the Senate Democratic candidates. For example, in Michigan, Biden received 69,093 more votes than the Democratic candidate Gary Peters. This is almost 10 times more than the 7,131 vote count difference between Trump and the Senate Republican candidate John James. The case in Georgia is even more exaggerated, where the vote count between Biden and the Senate Democratic candidate differed by 95,801 votes. That is 117 times the 818 vote count variance between Trump and the Republican candidate. What do these abnormal differences illustrate? They indicate that in swing states, a large number of voters only voted for Biden, but not the Democratic senator. This possibility does exist, but if such a phenomena only appears in swing states and on such a large scale, what does it mean? In 2020, the Cook Political Report and the New York Times listed 27 seats in the House of Representatives as having unpredictable results. At present, Republicans seem to have won all of those 27 seats, and Democrats have not been able to overturn any of the Republican House seats. In New Hampshire, the Republican Party simultaneously overturned the seats in the State House of Representatives and the Senate, and expanded its majority position in the state assembly nationwide.
I want the votes to be counted. Vote count, and every vote should be counted. Absolutely.
I'm going to keep looking into some of what's been happening. We're going to keep interviewing people about the allegations of election fraud, seeing what we can find. With so many abnormalities, I had to find more answers. Is it possible these are the result of mail-in ballots? Due to the CCP virus this year, mail-in ballots were used widely throughout the United States, and this is the biggest difference between 2020 and past elections. Just how much did mail-in ballots affect the integrity of the 2020 elections? I was determined to find out. Since November 4th, witnesses and insiders have been coming forward with accusations and testimony of fraudulent activity in swing states. One whistleblower in particular caught my attention with his roller coaster experience. Pennsylvanian U.S. postal worker Richard Hopkins revealed this story to the nonprofit organization Project Veritas, exposing that Erie County Postmaster Robert Weisenbach told postal workers to separate mail-in ballots that arrived after November 3rd from other mail and to postmark them with an earlier date so they would be counted.
They should have backdated the November 4th ballot to November 3rd, correct?
Yes.
After speaking out, Hopkins was threatened by his superior, interrogated by federal agent Russell Strasser for 4 hours, and forced to sign an affidavit recanting his allegations. Hopkins was denied access to a lawyer and a copy of his signed affidavit. His Twitter account was also shut down. On November 10th, the Washington Post published a false report claiming that Hopkins fabricated the charges, and the New York Times followed with a similar story. However, the Washington Times published a completely opposite report, stating that Hopkins denied recanting his allegations.
I'm here to say that I did not recant my statements. And I would like that the Washington Post recant their wonderful little article that they decided to throw out there.
If Richard Hopkins' claims were false, why was he threatened by his superior? Why did completely opposite stories appear about him in the media? Did all 6 states in dispute experience the same anomalies in this election? The media did not just deny Richard's statement. The New York Times reported that they interviewed representatives from every state, but not a single person mentioned that the anomalies could be election fraud. I had to question this. The American people really need the facts. A video was forwarded to me, featuring another Pennsylvania resident with explosive fraud allegations.
I can't believe what I'm seeing right before my eyes. This has nothing to do with Joe Biden or Donald Trump. This has to do with our democracy, and I will tell you, there is corruption at the highest level in the city of Philadelphia.
This witness was an accredited election observer and a registered Democrat. I had to find out more, so I began investigating in Pennsylvania, which holds 20 electoral votes, the highest of all remaining swing states.
I grew up in Philadelphia. I was in banking with JP Morgan for 12 years. I've been a Major League Baseball agent since 2006. And recently I was asked by the Republican Party to be a poll watcher at the Philadelphia Convention Center. First row of, I call them ballot counters, the people processing and counting the ballots, the first row was about 25, 30 feet. After that, the machines, the rows, they kept getting further and further, and this hole went back 150 feet, 200 feet. But we did not have access. We couldn't see the people closest to us, about 25 feet. You couldn't see what was going on, unless you're Superman with X-ray vision, let alone see what's going on in the back. It was coordinated where they had supervisors to answer to. And in the back, there were exit doors. I have no idea who was there, but in the right-hand side, what caught my attention, okay, were black trash, which looked like piles of black trash bags. So I was standing there and I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. There was no transparency. There was no one there to answer questions. There were people taking pictures and video, and when they took the pictures and video, they were asked to delete them, or if the security guard saw you. I wasn't the only one that took a video. However, if you look at that hole and the setup of the hole, obviously it looks like they're hiding something, and they don't want us to see something. So now, there was a list at the convention hall of people that were not allowed in, and I was one of them. I'm not going to do conspiracies, but the reality is, if somebody wanted to bring in ballots in that back door at the Philadelphia Convention Center, orchestrate it, they could have done it easily.
Besides Pennsylvania, the state having the most rumors of election fraud was Michigan, with 16 electoral votes on the line. Wayne County, especially Detroit, is the region with the most whistleblowers so far.
I got sent 7 absentee ballots with never applying for one. One of them was sent to me in my maiden name, and I went to vote in person on November 3rd. And after giving them my ID card, I ended up having to fill out an affidavit because I was questioned if I had voted already, and I haven't. Come to find out that somebody did vote in my name. I don't care who you voted for, voter fraud's real, and this election is rigged.
They were just rescanning, counting ballots 9 to 10 times. These workers were rescanning these batches of ballots numerous times. I mean, sometimes I saw between 8 and 10 times for them to be rescanned. That's just one person. You know, that happened in a 24-hour shift thousands of times. The whole time I was there in a 24-hour shift, there was not a single time that I saw one ballot for Trump. Not a single time.
The TCF Center became the focal point in Detroit, Michigan, as more and more witnesses emerged.
This is where I witnessed they were counting ballots that were not registered. They weren't in the poll log, the QVF, and they couldn't verify them.
The ballots that came in could not be matched with the electronic qualified voter file, and the ballots could not be matched with the paper file, yet they still counted those ballots. Boom. That's illegal. That's wrong. You can't do that. Also, in my affidavit, I said how I wanted to challenge all these other ballots, and I was prohibited from doing so.
So if you question anything, they would intentionally circle you and intimidate you?
At one point, I was trying to
challenged one of the names on there, and the woman actually turned around and physically pushed me away.
The atmosphere in the room was really hostile. There were multiple times where when I was at my table, I got just hollered at for like stepping closer to try to look.
So there was boxes and almost like suitcases back there too. A big pile of them with saran wrap all over them. We inquired about those, and the young guy who was standing there, he goes, if you don't walk away from these suitcases or from this back door, I will arrest you.
I was not feeling comfortable. No idea what's going to happen. I have a little baby. I'm pregnant, want to keep myself safe. And so it was around this time that I started thinking about I need to leave.
I estimate right there, fraudulent votes that they counted, I saw with my own eyes, 8,000 to 16,000 fraudulent votes.
I do believe that fraud was very evident at the TCF Center in Detroit.
There were so many inconsistencies, so much intimidation, and I can't figure out what you would be doing unless you were hiding something. It just didn't add up.
We have stuck our necks out, have been intimidated, threatened.
Thousands of people from across the Commonwealth have reached out to us, tens of thousands.
People are not feeling good nor confident about the process and the results because of that process.
These are not normal activities.
This is no game, and the very republic very much is at stake. Anyone who loves this country has to put aside their petty partisan politics and allow the light to shine where it is.
I'm here for one thing only, and that is to speak the truth.
The date the ballot was issued, the date.
A few days after the election, data analyst Matt Brainerd set up a team to look for data anomalies across 6 disputed states of Pennsylvania, Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, and Nevada. His team initially determined that at least 1.25 million votes had data irregularities. They then investigated the abnormalities by phone calls and data cross-referencing.
Well, the law in Georgia is when you register to vote, you have to mark down what your actual residence is. So you can have a separate mailing address, which is fine, that they will record, but you have to put down what your actual residence is. But what we had found was a large number of people, substantial, especially given how tight the margin is, well over 1,000, who voted in this election, listed themselves at addresses that are in fact postal facilities. Facilities the Postal Service either lease or own. So that could include a post office, the UPS store, FedEx store, anything like that. And not only did they list themselves there, but they disguised a P.O. box as an apartment. So rather than saying P.O. Box 123, the address is listed as apartment 123. And that's a major red flag. And what's also remarkable about these individuals is that almost all of them voted early absentee. Very few voted in person. So that really raises a red flag because they're illegally registered, and not just incidentally, but intentionally meant to deceive. We found over 1,000 of them in Georgia. In fact, over 1,400 so far in Pennsylvania as well, with the very same tactic. There was a number of people in all 6 states where we were doing our tests who the state marked as having requested an absentee ballot, but they didn't return it. So we reached out to these people and asked 2 questions. The first question we asked is, did you actually request that ballot? And in many cases they said no, which is a big red flag because somebody had to request that ballot, and by law it had to be them or somebody that they designated legally to do so.
We show that in the state of Pennsylvania is marked as having received an absentee ballot request from you but did not receive your absentee ballot. Did you request an absentee ballot?
No.
You can see very clearly, we'll get a street view here. U.S. Postal Service. Open and shut. Fraud.
And they have an apartment number.
Yeah, so that's actually P.O. Box 244, but as you can plainly see, I'd be happy to share. I can actually. We ran 6 different analyses, in fact 7 now in Pennsylvania, and all of them showed problems. We ran an analysis where we called people who had moved, yet they were told that they had a ballot cast in their name. We called them and asked, did you vote? Did you actually cast that ballot? And we found people that said no, they didn't. We dialed into precincts that had exceptionally high turnout and spoke to people who had voted in this election but didn't have a record of voting much at all, if ever at all, before, and found people in that universe that said, no, I did not cast a ballot. Somebody else cast that ballot in my name.
What's your process in terms of making sure the data stands?
So you have to start with the authoritative data, which is what the state provides. And leading up to the election, the state releases a list every day of people who voted earlier absentee or requested an absentee ballot or sent in an absentee ballot request or requested a request for an absentee ballot. So usually that's all documented by the state. So we took those as basically at the close after the election to have the entire records of everybody who requested absentee ballots or voted early. We appended it with phone numbers. We also bounced it up against the National Change of Address database, which is maintained by the Postal Service. It's a fairly reliable match because you're not just matching on name, but also on full name and address. And we also matched it up against the Social Security Death Index and the Master Death File to see if anybody matches up against it, because that's one of the often accused methods of alleged voter fraud.
Brainerd's team discovered that Georgia had 138,221 people who had already left Georgia but still voted through mail-in ballots. This was concerning because Biden's lead in Georgia was currently sitting at only 12,670 votes ahead of Trump. In Wisconsin, he found 26,673 people who left the state but still voted in Wisconsin via mail-in ballots, and Biden was leading by only 20,608 votes. And in Arizona, he found 19,997 people who had moved out of the state but had still voted with mail-in ballots. And Biden's lead in Arizona is only 10,457. Brainerd believes the data his team uncovered is enough to flip the election results in all 3 states, which have a total of 37 electoral votes.
I'm signing witness reports as an expert, and if needed, I'm going to be testifying in court if it gets to that point. So this isn't speculative. This is just what the data shows.
Let us know what you want us to hear.
A surveillance video from the State Farm Arena voting center in Georgia was released to the public.
I am a lawyer, but I'm not acting as a lawyer in this case. I'm just helping out the legal team here. And going to explain to you the evidence that we have from State Farm Arena here in Fulton County, which goes to what Ray was talking about in terms of fraud or misrepresentation.
It showed that on the night of November 3rd, the voting center announced it was stopping ballot counting and asked all Republican poll watchers and journalists to leave, but 4 people remained.
Okay, there they walk. They're walking off.
After everyone else had left, those 4 people pulled out ballot containers that had been hidden from sight during the entire day. And without any poll watchers or public observers, they processed and counted ballots until 1 a.m.
The reason we know this is because when our Republican observers were forced to leave, they went to the Central Tabulation Center and they got word from a news crew that in fact counting had continued. They have information that not everybody left according to plan, and some people stayed behind.
Based on the length of time of this operation, the number of ballots processed illegally would have exceeded Biden's reported lead in the state. This illegal act of fraud must have been planned and organized in advance. Who instigated and directed this illegal activity during the 2020 election?
You may recall the old quote attributed to Stalin that says, "I don't care who votes, I care about who counts the votes." That's what matters.
Election challenger and former Michigan State Republican Senator Patrick Kolbeck was monitoring the vote counting process at Detroit's TVS Center.
First of all, I am a former Michigan State Senator. I served on the Michigan Senate Elections and Government Reform Committee. I took those duties very seriously to the point of diagramming out all of our election processes, so I had a pretty good understanding of how elections were supposed to work from a book perspective.
My role was that of a poll challenger, and I served in the Detroit AV Counting Board as a poll challenger certified by an organization that I helped form called the Election Integrity Fund. There are Wi-Fi routers all over the place, including one called AV_Connect. So that kind of tells me that absentee voter _connect. So there's suspicion there. When you go over to the tabulators, I went to all the different tabulator workstations, went underneath the tables and checked out where all these cables were routed. All the tabulator computers were connected via Ethernet cables to a network router, and that router in turn was connected to another router, was connected to the adjudicators. Those were connected to another router / firewall probably. It was a little bit different spec on it than the normal one, which was connected to the internet, which was connected to the local data center. And so anybody who understands IT understands that if one computer is connected on a network to the internet, all the computers on that network are connected to the internet.
A voting machine connected to the internet is especially vulnerable to hackers. According to the 2020 election outline published by the Michigan Bureau of Elections, voting machines cannot be connected to the internet during ballot tabulation. Based on Michigan election regulations, vote count data must be transferred through USB drives, and computers must be placed in airplane mode to be disconnected from the internet.
Why were the election officials that were local so adamant that none of this equipment was connected to the internet? I can actually show the Michigan contract with Dominion Voting Systems that specified specifically that this equipment was meant to be connected to the internet. The fact that they're denying it begs the question, why are they denying this? Why is it important for them to deny it? So there's some serious concerns right up at the top.
Wayne County is the most populous county in Michigan, with 1.41 million registered voters in 2020, which is 17.35% of the state total. The county government is located in Detroit. The Michigan ballot result has Biden leading over Trump by 146,007 votes. And Biden's advantage is effectively due to Wayne County. Without Wayne County, Trump would lead by 186,630 votes.
If you have the ability to connect your election gear to the internet, you've already violated the Federal Election Commission's rulings.
We've talked about internet connectivity and why there's be problems. Why would there be problems?
They have found in our election that there are millions of people or names of people that have voted for one candidate, for Joe Biden, above and beyond the total number of registered voters in those districts. In other words, all across the nation, we're finding more and more votes. The only way you could do that quickly is either mail-in ballots or a combination of mail-in ballots and voter fraud using the software to do it for you. If you want to quickly change an election, it's easy to change the software and do that if it can be connected to the internet. There's all these videos of hacking election gear. Right, here's another one. Look at that, look how easy this is.
When it's off, removing the card reader, removing this, you don't need any tools to do this. Unplugging this, again, you don't need any tools to do this. Turning it on, all you have to do is pick this lock here with a ballpoint pen. Open this up, press the red button.
So she's rebooting, and when she reboots, guess what? Get a few error messages. Now she has administrative permission to give you 200 votes to my one.
Full admin access, under 2 minutes.
Years ago, you had to be a super hacker. And if you look at some of the videos from the HBO documentary on hacking election gear to CBS, NBC, CNN, Fox, and others, for the past 5 or 6 years, they've shown all these vulnerabilities in all this gear. So it's super easy. It doesn't require super intelligence.
The number of methods of election fraud alleged in the 2020 election kept growing, as more and more evidence kept coming in from sworn affidavits by eyewitnesses and careful data analysis. I began to realize that our investigations had only just scratched the surface.
What I saw was not a secure and transparent election.
What I saw as a forensics expert was an election process that was forensically destructive.
No track, no remedy, no records.
The vote as it presently exists is false.
Dominion. Every witness I interviewed, including many whistleblowers, pointed at a connection between Dominion voting machines and election fraud allegations. Is that why Dominion became a public focal point after election night? According to Dominion's official website, the Dominion voting system is currently used in 28 U.S. states and the territory of Puerto Rico. More than 40% of U.S. voters vote through the Dominion voting system in general elections. 65 of the 83 counties in Michigan use the Dominion voting system. 159 counties in Georgia also use it, And in Arizona, Dominion serves 2.2 million voters in Maricopa County. When I typed in Dominion voting system and safe in a Google search, the first result I got was a USA Today story, fact check, Dominion voting machines didn't delete votes from Trump, switched them to Biden, followed by similar headings from other media. When I typed in Dominion voting system and fraud, the first thing I saw was AFP's fact check, video of Dominion voting employee in Georgia does not show election fraud. Next, a Fox News report on Dominion stated, DHS calls election the most secure in America history. Mainstream media seem to have already prepared voters with a set of talking points to immediately counter any possible fraud allegations. But if you search deeper, you'll see that prior to this presidential election, mainstream media presented a completely opposite perspective on the security of Dominion voting systems. They were previously skeptical of Dominion security. In April 2018, the New York Times showed viewers how easy it is to hack an election via a video of University of Michigan's computer science professor J. Alex Halderman demonstrating to students the hacking process of a Dominion voting machine. So it was intriguing to me to see that same J. Alex Halderman appear on Fox News this year and emphasize that the 2020 election was the most secure election in American history.
Professor, did Dominion voting machines change any votes?
Well, no. There is absolutely no evidence, none.
Similarly, CNN published a video in November 2016 titled, How Hackers Could Swing the Election, warning of the high risk of hacking attacks on electronic voting systems. Another CNN video published in August 2017 said, we watched hackers break into voting machines, showed participants at the World Hacking Conference DEF CON successfully hack into all voting machines available. This was a hacking experiment organized by Jake Braun, a former security advisor of the Department of Homeland Security during the Obama administration. The purpose was to highlight vulnerabilities in voting machines and warn that they could be the biggest threat to democracy in American history. When asked if he thought it was possible for the 2020 election to be infiltrated, Braun answered,
Do you believe that right now we are in a position where the 2020 election will be hacked?
Oh, without question.
NBC was also on board with their August 2019 report, How Hackers Can Target Voting Machines. An authority on voting system security, Dr. Andrew Appel, a professor of computer science at Princeton University, told Fox News in 2016 how simple it was to attack and switch votes in a Dominion voting machine. In September 2016, he provided a written testimony with recommendations on election voting security to a House Subcommittee on Information Technology hearing on cybersecurity. He said, quote, I strongly recommend that, at a minimum, the Congress seek to ensure the elimination of touchscreen voting machines immediately after this November election, and that it require that all elections be subject to sensible auditing after every election to ensure that systems are functioning properly and to prove to the American people that their votes are counted as cast. He continued, paper ballots are even better protection against fraud with systematic auditing to make sure the computers aren't cheating. You don't have to recount every ballot box, just spot check a statistical sample. There are 12 states that do this by law. It's a good idea, and all states should do it. In September 2017, Dr. Appel also testified at the U.S. House Oversight and Government Reform Committee's hearing on election cybersecurity. In 2020, in a keynote speech delivered at Princeton, Dr. Appel repeated his views.
Even a computer scientist can't see inside the computer to really know what software programming is running in that computer today. All computerized voting machines can be hacked.
I felt anxious seeing the mainstream media and a top expert flip-flop on their opinion and testimony. Had these security concerns about Dominion really changed?
I would submit that many of the features of Dominion that are being characterized as glitches are actually designed features of Dominion to help people manipulate the results of the election. We had a outage at all the tabulator computer. I think it was a tabulator or adjudicator computers, they were down for 45 minutes due to network issues. We also had issues with some of the poll books that we understand there was an error message that popped up that there was a notable gasp when it happened, and it said, warning, this computer is being hacked. The errors that popped up on the computers with the tabulators and adjudicators was something called backup overflow. That's not a standard Windows error message. Where you do see that error message is on when you're trying to back up to a SQL database. Now, either each one of these tabulators had their own SQL database built into that workstation, or they were trying to connect to some outside database that was not local at that workstation. So you couple that with the fact that some strange things similar to that were happening up in Antrim County, where we already have evidence that 6,000 votes were flipped from Biden to Trump. Now you start putting together a picture where this whole internet connectivity becomes pretty important.
There's nothing secure about the Dominion voting gear or any other, or even Diebold and others. Nothing secure. And patches are just pieces of software added to already complex, insecure systems.
From a cybersecurity standpoint, why would patches be a vulnerability?
We haven't seen the patch that was installed in 30 states on the Dominion gear. So when someone writes a patch can open a back door, change an algorithm for better or worse, accidentally have a bug in it that allows what we call buffer overflow or other software exploits. Most of the time, patches actually close one hole and open one or more new holes.
The public who purchased this equipment is not allowed to look in at the code or know how to operate. It creates a space for people to make accusations and have theories about how votes were stolen or switched through some kind of hacking or some other nefarious electronic means. That space only exists. You can only make those accusations, and people can only believe them because all of those are closed source software packages and closed source machinery. If it was open source, it would be much more difficult to make that kind of accusation.
Let's say that we have 1,000 people in a bank and they all have, let's say, $100 each in the bank. Now they're earning interest. So if you hack into that bank and you notice that someone's earning interest, the interest is not 1 full penny or 5 cents. It can be a half a penny that day. So anything under a penny might not be recognized. So you slice the half a penny out of that person's account and move it to yours. You slice 3/4 of a penny out of this person's account and move it to yours. Their bank account numbers always look normal because we don't publicly publish when you log into your bank account that you have a half a penny of interest. We wait till it rounds up to a full penny. So that's called the salami method.
So you're not talking about switching full votes, you're talking about switching fractions of votes?
We have a problem with software and hardware for voting, not paper ballots, because they allow percentages of votes. One person can have 1 vote, or they can have 0.5 vote, 0.2 vote, 0.1 vote. So I can take 0.9 away from you for myself and give you 0.1 just from 1 vote. The salami method has probably been used in our election by slicing votes away from one candidate, the current president, Donald Trump, slicing his votes away and then moving them, shifting them to Joe Biden. And that's called the salami method. And if you do it right, you can actually slice so many times in so many counties that it shifts a dramatic amount of votes to a different candidate.
This reminded me of an unusual scene in CNN's live election night broadcast, which I saw captured on a netizen's cell phone. As the host was interpreting the results in several key states, a live ticker on the bottom of the screen showed the vote count in various states. It first showed that Trump had 1,690,589 votes in Pennsylvania versus Biden's 1,252,537. But after just half a minute, the ticker showed Trump's count suddenly drop, while Biden's suddenly increased. Normally, the vote count for each candidate only increases as the ballot counting proceeds, but during those 30 seconds, Trump's count dropped by almost 20,000 votes, while Biden's jumped up by almost 20,000 votes. Notice how the drop in Trump's count and the increase in Biden's count is suspiciously the exact same number of votes. 19,958.
I'd like to see the logs. I'd like to see the algorithm. I'd like that to be analyzed by someone like myself who can read and write computer code.
I had training as a corporate lawyer. And when you're a corporate attorney on Wall Street or in Los Angeles or anywhere else, when you research a company to take it public or to, as an investment banker, to finance it, you do your background check. You do your true due diligence. You kick the tires. Diebold, if you look at their history, was fraught with all kinds of problems. They've had issues across the land. And eventually their software, their hardware, their IP all wound up in the hands of, guess who? Dominion.
It's not just Dominion, by the way. It's voting equipment that's running software that had internet connectivity, whether or not it was patched, whether or not someone had admin permission to go in and change the way it operates easily by following downloadable instructions. We blame those who were allowed to have access to this gear, how the gear was set up, why this gear was set up. Why did certain states accept very vulnerable, easily manipulated equipment?
And who had access to that equipment? And what changes could they have made right before the election? A month before the 2020 election, the parent company of Dominion Voting Systems received $400 million in funding. This was shocking news, and I suspected there must be some significant clue to find out what was hidden behind this. First, I discovered that the three related parties to this transaction all exhibited strange behavior before and after the election. Staple Street Capital, a middle-market private equity firm, was founded on June 9, 2009 and purchased Dominion on July 16, 2018 for about $265 million. Shortly after the election on November 3rd, the company website underwent a full transformation. All information about the company's founders and investment portfolios were deleted. One can no longer find any relationship with Dominion from the website. Dominion Voting Systems. On the evening of November 19, 2020, the head of Dominion canceled at the last minute a planned appearance at the Pennsylvania House of Representatives hearing.
Instead of running towards the light of honesty and integrity, Dominion Voting Systems retreated to the darkness. Why are they hiding from us?
The next day, Dominion's product strategy and security director Eric Coomer went missing. His bio was deleted from the Dominion company website. The company's Canadian headquarters in Toronto suddenly closed, and the US headquarters in Denver, Colorado also closed without notice. Coincidentally, when Dominion became a global focus after the election, over 100 employees, a third of the total workforce, erased their LinkedIn records, including Dominion's employees in Serbia. UBS Securities LLC. According to SEC filings, UBS Securities LLC arranged $400 million in investment to Staple Street Capital on October 8, 2020, less than a month before the election. This was the second time UBS Securities LLC had transacted with Staple Street. The first time was on December 19, 2014 in the amount of $200 million. We also discovered that there are two firms called UBS Securities in the world. One is registered in New York with an LLC suffix. The other is registered in Beijing with a co-Ltd suffix. UBS Beijing also recently undertook some very peculiar actions. On the morning of December 1st in the US, lawyer Lin Wood alleged on Twitter that China purchased Dominion Voting on October 8th for $400 million. On the previous day in China, UBS Beijing's board of directors saw 11 out of 14 members replaced. Was the large-scale replacement of board members at UBS Beijing a coincidence, or was there some kind of relationship? Making a sizable investment into the parent company of Dominion, which had a 40% market share in the US electronic voting equipment space right before the election, suddenly propelled UBSNY into the focal point on social media. I took a deep dive into the corporate structure of UBS Securities LLC. The company's profile on Bloomberg shows that 3 out of the 4 board members are Chinese. Their names are Luo Cheng, Ye Xiang, and Mu Lina. Other than Luo Qiang, who has French nationality, The other two are Chinese nationals with very close ties to UBS Beijing. Based on public information, Luo Cheng is a banker who held senior executive positions at Citibank and Morgan Stanley. Between 2004 and 2012, he was the chief banking specialist at the International Finance Corporation, a member of the World Bank Group. During that time, Luo also served on the board of UBS Beijing. Luo Cheng held board positions at both UBS NY and UBS Beijing. Ye Xiang has a very diverse background. Other than being a board member of UBS NY, he is also the managing director at Vision Gain Capital in Hong Kong, as well as a columnist for Cai Xin, a media company with deep ties to the CCP. At the same time, Ye is an independent board member of at least 6 other companies in China and a supervisor of more than 8 Chinese companies. Before the sudden change in board members at UBS Beijing, Ye had been chairman of the board at UBS Beijing for over 10 years. In Hong Kong, Ye had been the senior consultant for chairman and CEO of Hong Kong Securities and Futures Commission, an executive director of Bank of China International, a senior analyst at the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, and secretary of foreign financial institutions at the People's Bank of China. Mu Lina is a 40-something finance undergraduate. Along with being on the board of UBS NY, she is also the director of wealth management funds and head of fund operations at UBS Beijing. Mu's background is shrouded in secrecy. Her photo cannot be found on the internet. It should be noted that Mu is an independent board member of 2 companies, Chongqing Three Gorges Water Conservancy and Electric Power Co. Ltd. and SureCam Corporation until September 7, 2020. SureCam Corporation's business includes Internet of Things, cloud computing, and big data. Its CEO, Pan Fan, was an employee at Huawei for 14 years. Similarly, SureCam's business focused on internet and surveillance, and internet and law enforcement. It participated in the construction of the 3-dimensional social security system, as well as the Skynet project, a video surveillance system, electronic fence, and other CCP digital totalitarian efforts. It can be said that SureCam is a miniature Huawei and an enabler of the CCP's digital totalitarian state. The 3 UBS NY board members, Luo Cheng, Ye Xiang, and Mu Lina, all held board or executive positions at UBS NY and UBS Beijing, either at different points in time or concurrently. There is a clear link between the 2 UBS securities companies. UBS Securities Co. Ltd., or UBS Beijing, was established under personal supervision by the current Vice President of China, Wang Qishan. According to the company's Chinese website, UBS Beijing was registered toward the end of 2006 as the first foreign-invested, exclusively managed, fully licensed securities firm in China. Based on the name, people often associate UBS Securities with the Swiss bank UBS. However, the company was actually a rebranding of the failed state-owned company Beijing Securities. Current UBS Beijing chairman, Chiang Yu-jun, presented during a 2017 interview that UBS Group received a full license of Beijing Securities with a 24.99% stake in UBS Beijing. Other stakeholders, including Beijing Guoxiang Asset Management with 33%, Guangdong Provincial Communications Group with 14.01%, China Guodian Capital Holding with 14%, and COFCO Group with 14%. Note that Beijing Guoxiang only had 1 shareholder, China Construction Bank. Under the care of Wang Qishan, UBS Group became the first foreign company to own a full securities operations license in China. UBS Beijing's business spanned securities underwriting, wealth management, private business, among others. UBS Beijing once executed IPOs for Bank of China, Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, China Construction Bank, China Merchants Bank, China Minsheng Bank, and other banks. It can be said that UBS Beijing has a monopoly in China. When the CCP introduced new policies in 2018 to allow controlling stakes by foreign companies, UBS increased its stake in UBS Beijing to 51%. Yet the company continued to be under CCP control as the board and executives were all Chinese nationals even to this day. close are the ties between UBS Beijing and the CCP? The backgrounds of two UBS Beijing executives could clarify this issue. Cheng Yi-sun, General Manager and Board Director of UBS Beijing. Cheng Yi-sun was an expert targeted in the CCP's Thousand Talents Plan, or TTP. A report on FX168.com describes Sheng and his wife, Xu Xiaohong, as special targets of the TTP. Cheng's uncle, Cheng Kai-jia, was the founder and architect of CCP nuclear experimentation and the recipient of the 2 bombs, 1 satellite medal. Cheng Yi-sun studied nuclear science at university and only changed professions after studying abroad. Xu Zhe, Board Director of UBS Beijing, Manager and Chairman of CapInfo Co., Ltd. CapInfo is viewed as the industry leader among Beijing's state-owned enterprises in the realm of e-government. Its partners include Huawei, ZTE, Unit 61019, and 61195, Science and Technology Exchange Center of the Chinese People's Liberation Army, the Chinese military, the Institute of Computer Technology at the Chinese Academy of Sciences, and others in the political legal system. CapInfo has multiple layers of partnerships with the military, intelligence, and political legal systems. It is a classic example of a military-civilian fusion enterprise. Add to that Mu Lina, with her background in Huawei Junior Surecam Corporation. One can only say that UBS Beijing is a highly integrated company of CCP military, intelligence, political legal, digital totalitarian, and financial oligarch forces. For a financial company like UBS Group, which has such close ties to the CCP and possibly part of the CCP's unrestricted warfare system, one can't help but wonder if this significant arrangement of investment by one of its subsidiaries was a typical transaction purely for profit, or if there were other motives involved.
I want to start tonight with evidence, with a remarkable video.
On the evening of December 7th, 2020, the Tucker Carlson Tonight Show broadcasted video clips of a public lecture given by a CCP academic at the end of November in Shanghai. They revealed the explosive inside story of how the CCP was able to infiltrate and compromise America over the last few decades via Wall Street and old friends.
前边特朗普政府跟我们打贸易战，那么我们为什么搞不定特朗普政府？为什么以前1992年到2016年之间，中美之间各种问题都能搞得定？是不是？大家发现没有？所有的危机，不管是银河号事件，还是炸大使馆，还是撞了飞机，所有事情全部是床头吵架床尾和，2个月之内搞定。什么原因？这儿我抛出一个可能又要是暴论了，就是因为咱们上边有人，就是我们在美国的权势核心圈我们有我们的老朋友。2015年这个上次习总书记访问美国之前呢，我们知道各个系统都要在美国帮他暖场，是不是？那么咱们的党的某个系统，他在美国帮他暖场的方式呢，就是舆论舆论的话呢，就是这个习近平谈治国理政那本书的新书英文版第1版新书发布会放在美国，在他去之前先搞一个新书发布会帮他造势。天下没有美元搞不定的事情，是吧？如果一打美元搞不定，是吧？那我就晾他。这个当然这是我的工作方式。好，那么其实呢，就是说说的白了点其实呢，就过去这个30年过去40年，我们在美国的他的这个利用他权势核心圈，是不是？我前面讲过，华尔街在1970年代开始对美国它的内政外交有非常强的影响力所以我们有路径依赖，是吧？但问题是08年之后，华尔街的地位下降了。更重要的是16年之后，华尔街搞不定特朗普，为什么？很尴尬。特朗普以前对华尔街有过一次软性违约，所以双方有矛盾中美贸易战过程中，他们也试图帮忙据我所知，美方的朋友跟我讲，这个试图帮忙，但是力有不逮但现在呢？现在我们看到拜登上台了，传统的精英、政治精英这个建制派，他们跟华尔街的关系是非常密切的。所以大家看到吧， 拜登的儿子被特朗普说你在全球有什么基金公司，发现没有？谁帮他建的基金公司啊？明白吗？这里边都有买卖啊。那么，所以这个时候我们以恰当的方式进行一定的这样一个表达一个善意啊。我个人理解，当然这个受限于我的专业基础是吧？我们是从国际政治经济学的角度去理解这个事儿。那么我认为有它的战术和政治的价值在里边。
The speaker is Dr. Di Dongsheng, Vice Director and Secretary of the Center for Foreign Strategic Studies of China and Vice Dean of the School of International Relations, Renmin University of China, and a member of Xi Jinping's Brain Trust. Even though Di is part of Xi's Brain Trust, he seems more like a CCP whistleblower here. Throughout his speech, he conveyed a full picture of the CCP's unrestricted warfare against the U.S. over the past 30 years. Many Americans only began to grasp the meaning of the CCP's unrestricted warfare concept due to this year's pandemic. The attack on Pearl Harbor was an overt strike by the Japanese, but to the CCP, a war for global rule can take many forms, with no restrictions, as long as the objective is ultimate victory. The CCP had already proposed back in the 1990s the use of unrestricted warfare to defeat America. The intentional worldwide spread of the virus from Wuhan was the CCP's biological warfare. Fentanyl, which kills 30,000 Americans each year, is the CCP's drug warfare. This is also unrestricted warfare that aims to manipulate the election and enable a CCP proxy to be elected. They are not only organizing a large-scale systematic fraud through Dominion voting systems, Smartmatic voting software, and Skydle, but also scientific warfare, digital warfare, public opinion warfare, and a multitude of other methods which are all part of unrestricted warfare.
What does China want? Well, ultimately, the Chinese Communist Party wants to be the global hegemon. It wants to be the center of political, strategic, and economic decision-making. It wants a world that refuses to defend itself from the Chinese Communist Party so that the Chinese Communist Party will never be challenged in China, that it will maintain its dictatorship of power forever. Cyber warfare assists all of these goals. And the manipulation of elections, if possible, is certainly an option that the Chinese Communist Party would want to exercise as it proceeds to make the world safe for its dictatorship.
The challenge that we face is that the Chinese Communist Party sees political warfare as its primary motivation or primary axis of war. It's not about weapons. It's about using influence and financial incentives to encourage the kind of behavior they want, whether that be a corporate leader, whether it be a financial leader, whether that be a political leader. So we're today in their element.
Many phenomena and conflicts in society are actually part of the CCP's unrestricted warfare. Why is there increasing division between Americans based on political alignment? Why have Antifa attacks, vandalism, looting, and other violent attacks been appearing across the nation? Why does it seem like the media and social media all have an invisible propaganda department in the background controlling freedom of press and freedom of speech? Why are anti-CCP opinions and content exposing election fraud blocked or deleted by Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and others? Why are the mainstream media declaring Biden the victor of the 2020 election and totally ignoring the provisions set forth in the Constitution of the United States? These are all strategies in the CCP's unrestricted warfare playbook. Penetrate fully into the enemy's cells, use a 1,000 talents plan to steal technology, use the media, associations, and social media to create social conflicts. Get someone who will bow to Beijing's will elected, and advance forward until total control over the nation is achieved. It's worth noting that the CCP's infiltration of American society could not have occurred without the support of the elites of the Western world and special interest groups. These are the so-called old friends of the CCP. Who are these old friends? Let's flip back to January 2008 when Obama was sworn into the White House.
Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear.
Dana Simpson is an expert in election integrity and technology and a former employee of the Tides Foundation in Canada, funded by George Soros. According to her years of investigations into Dominion, she discovered that Dominion was able to obtain 30 to 40% of the American electronic voting machine market as a result of Obama directing the then Attorney General to ensure his own re-election. In addition to uncovering how the Department of Justice helped Canada's Dominion acquire a firm foothold in the U.S., Simpson also found out from a Serbian journalist that Obama's Vice President, Joe Biden, visited Serbia in May 2009 to, quote, cut a deal to help Serbian hackers in Belgrade, where he was visiting to get control of information about voting machines. Dominion has also made donations to the Clinton Foundation. On June 9th, Staple Street Capital was officially registered. The private equity firm was founded by Stephen Owens and Hutan Yagudzabe. A member of the operating executive board was William Kennard. All three were former employees of the Cargill Group. Kennard was also the chair of the Federal Communications Commission from 1997 to 2001 during the Clinton administration. Thus, he oversaw media and communications in the United States. Kennard donated to the Obama election campaign. From 2009 to 2013, Obama appointed him as the U.S. ambassador to the European Union. On November 7, 2020, the fourth day after the election, AT&T announced William Kennard as the new chairman of the board. AT&T is the largest provider of communication services in the United States. Plus, with its acquisition of Warner Media, AT&T controlled CNN and multiple TV networks. In July 2018, Staple Street purchased Dominion. This implied that Kennard commanded the company that determined election results and then had more sway over American public opinion after the election through AT&T. On December 20th, 2014, UBS NY arranged an investment of $200 million in Staple Street. Subsequently, on October 8, 2020, UBS NY injected $400 million in Staple Street. Affiliate UBS Beijing was founded and controlled by Wang Qishan in 2006. At the same time, former CCP chairman Jiang Zemin and his grandson Jiang Jicheng, through Sequoia Capital's China branch, also took control of voting software developer Smartmatic, which is also related to Dominion. The Carlyle Group was founded in 1987. Investment tycoon George Soros became a limited partner at Carlyle in the mid-90s. Carlyle has been a force for globalization and has kept intimate partnerships with the CCP for a long time. After entering China in 2005, Carlyle played important roles in privatizing state-owned enterprises and witnessed how families of CCP elites stole from China.
It's a system whereby if you do not challenge the Chinese Communist Party's rule, if you don't challenge the party politically, and you abide by the Chinese Communist Party's mandates, whether you're a Chinese citizen or whether you're an American or whether you're a European, then you can essentially take advantage of the benefits provided by the Chinese Communist Party. So what they've done is essentially align Chinese Communist Party interest with the enablement of greed. And so they've done this in China. They've, they say in China to get rich is glorious. And in addition, they've been able to essentially incentivize the leaders of large tech companies, large financial institutions in the United States, the leaders of academic institutions, political leaders, and this is not just in the United States, but in democracies all around the world. And so essentially we face the destruction of the democratic order, but not at the hands of an adversary wielding nuclear weapons or with shock troops. It's really using our own tendency to essentially fall victim to greed. It's simple greed.
Well, China has a big stake in these elections. They've made it very clear they want to just get rid of President Trump. They're much more comfortable with Biden So what they've done, they've had these networks for some time, but there are communist parties in America that owe allegiance to the Chinese Communist Party. I'm talking about Liberation Road and their subgroup called Left Roots, the Communist Party USA, and others. And what these groups have been doing for several years now is setting up voter registration groups in key states. States that could be flipped from Republican to Democrat, for instance. And what they do is that they deliberately set up these groups to target minority voters, voters who lean Democrat but don't normally vote often. They call them low preponderance voters, low propensity voters. And so in Virginia, for instance, they've had new Virginia majority for some time. That's been working for over 10 years, and they take credit for flipping that state from Republican to Democrat. But this election now, they've run this out of San Francisco, a group called Seed the Vote. Now that is a front for the Chinese Progressive Association, which is a big voter registration group, community organizing group that's been based in San Francisco since the 1970s and has always been a tool of the Chinese Communist Party. So Seed the Vote has run a whole network of these big voter registration organizations, and they targeted 7 states this year: Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, Florida, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, all the key swing states. And so they signed up hundreds of thousands of low propensity voters. They got them to the polls, and they claim credit. They openly claim credit for winning the election for Biden, which is legal. You know, they're working legally in voter registration, but what is not legal is the fact that they're cooperating with the Communist Party of China and taking direction from the Communist Party of China.
Now, how can we prove that they're involved with the Chinese Communist Party?
Well, for instance, one of the key people of Seed the Vote is a man called Alex Tom. He's the past CEO of the Chinese Progressive Association in San Francisco. And he openly boasts about his deep connection to the Chinese officials in San Francisco. He talks about how he has regular conversations with them. He runs his positioning past them. And this is the guy who is basically running some of these major voter registration organizations.
China has had a very important role in funding left experiments. And we have a relationship with the Chinese embassy. Like, we actually have I've had to have various conversations with them about our positioning.
On the other side of it, New Virginia majority, they win their elections by using very sophisticated, what they call GIS, computer-generated maps. These are precinct maps, very, very specific, who will tell you the voter profiles in every district in Virginia, the ethnicity, the voting patterns, the income levels, so they can micro-target voters to get them to pick the voters they want. Well, these maps are generated by a man called Stephen McClure. He's a supporter of Liberation Road, the major pro-Chinese Communist Party behind this, and he works out of the geography department of Wuhan University in China. He is generating maps used to flip districts in Virginia and presumably other southern states as well, and he's working in a Chinese geography department using Chinese equipment, using Chinese computers, probably paid a salary by the Chinese Communist Party to basically interfere in American politics. So this is happening right under our very noses. You know, George Soros alone has put something like $18 billion into the left in the last 3 or 4 years. That buys a lot of votes. That sets up a lot of voter registration groups. That buys a lot of buses to ship people to the polls. Now, what these people are doing is legal, and that it's not illegal to sign up voters or get them to the polls, but they're working with organisations that definitely have histories of illegal voting activity, vote fraud. But the fact that they're working with entities connected to the Communist Party of China, that puts a whole different spin on it.
On December 9th, 2020, Biden's son, Hunter Biden, confirmed that he was under a tax investigation by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Delaware. As a result, the Hunter Biden hard drive scandal that was temporarily suppressed during the run-up to the election has resurfaced. This investigation was launched due to suspicious activity reports regarding suspicious foreign transactions from China and other countries.
When I talk to people, they're telling me, is there anything we reported?
December 9th, 2020, U.S. Senate committees released a bombshell report revealing alarming corruption in foreign business ventures involving former Vice President Joe Biden's son, Hunter. U.S. Senators Chuck Grassley, chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, and Ron Johnson, chairman of the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, released the near 90-page report titled Hunter Biden, Burisma, and Corruption, the Impact on U.S. Government Policy and Related Concerns. The report said, quote, "The Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs and the Senate Committee on Finance undertook this investigation into potential conflicts of interest and the involvement of the Biden family in foreign business ventures while Joe Biden was vice president. The committees found, quote, consistent, significant, and extensive financial connections among Biden family members and the Chinese Communist government." It states, quote, "Hunter Biden and Devon Archer engaged in numerous financial transactions with Chinese nationals who had deep connections to the Communist Chinese government." It continues, quote, "These Chinese nationals included Ye Jianming, founder of the CEFC China Energy Co., Ltd., and chairman of the board for its subsidiary, the China Energy Fund Committee." The report continues, stating, "Thus, there exists a vast web of corporate connections and financial transactions between and among the Biden family and Chinese nationals." It states, "Hunter Biden has extensive connections to Chinese businesses and Chinese foreign nationals that are linked to the communist governments. These contacts bore financial fruit when his father was vice president and after he left office." The report warned that the investigation found the Obama administration knew about and ignored Biden's problematic position on the board.
Well, clearly, I think China believes that they have a much better relationship with a potential President Joe Biden. That's clearly, portrayed when you look at the immense amount of money that they funneled through to Hunter Biden. But that goes without saying, because the challenge they've had with President Trump has been the fact that he's been pressuring them on almost all fronts, whether it be trade or finance or immigration or theft of intellectual property. He's basically unleashed the federal government to go after the Chinese Communist Party. Now, this has been completely opposite to the approach taken by all the former presidents since Kissinger, and certainly was counter to what I witnessed with the Obama administration, where Joe Biden was the vice president. So I think their clear incentive here is to reset the relationship between the U.S. and China in a way that promotes the Chinese Communist Party's interests.
On December 9th, 2020, YouTube announced, "We will start removing any piece of content uploaded today or any time after that misleads people by alleging that widespread fraud or errors changed the outcome of the 2020 U.S. presidential election." Also on December 9th, 2020, Mark Sarin outlined on social media how Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg donated hundreds of millions of dollars to the Center for Tech and Civic Life right before the election.
What they did was, on September 2nd, Mark Zuckerberg, at the time he announced he was contributing $300 million. We think it's up to $500 million since then. He announced another $100 million weeks later. To CTCL, the top 21 recipients of Zuckerberg grant money, which totaled $80 million, all went to Democrat-run cities where Hillary Clinton won by a large margin, in swing states primarily.
Well, I have a number of concerns when it comes to big tech. Twitter, for example, Twitter has been posting warning signs and, signs saying, you can't trust this content. There literally was a post a few days ago by President Trump referring to some of my work and to an appearance I made on a television show, the Tucker Carlson show. So Trump posted a link to that interview with me, and Twitter then attached a warning sign saying, the claims made here are fraudulent. So we have a number of problems here. We have multiple tech companies basically doing whatever they want to shift opinions however they please. That's the status quo right now. So following the election, their campaign, I guess we can call it a campaign, which is ironic, their campaign to control public opinion has not stopped. If anything, it's gotten worse.
The Trump phenomenon is what driving this whole thing. I think the media felt he was going to lose and lose badly. The polls were showing that he was going to lose and lose badly. So I think the assumption was on election night, they were going to interpret whatever news there was in that light. That the light was that Joe Biden was going to win. But this has been going on for 4 years.
One of the leaks from Google last year was of a computer application at Google, which is called Twiddler. And Twiddler is a system Google developed for re-ranking search results. I was told by the whistleblower who actually brought that manual out of the company, Zach Voorhees, I was told that if Google wanted to turn off the bias in search results that might favor one political candidate, for example, they could do so, he said, like flipping a switch. It's that easy. We also found what appears to be a smoking gun. We found a period of days before the election when the vote reminder on Google's homepage was going only to liberals. Not one of our conservative field agents got a vote reminder on those days.
The mainstream media in this country now is operating very much like the media used to operate in the Soviet Union or operates in communist China.
China has plenty of motivation to oppose the re-election of Donald Trump. In Donald Trump, you have the first American president in 50 years to stand up and defend American interests, defend American alliances, and defend American friends from Chinese predations. In Donald Trump, the Chinese finally met a global leader who would deny their goal of global hegemony. Therefore, the Chinese Communist Party had a direct and very strong interest in making sure, or doing whatever they could, to ensure that Donald Trump would be defeated in this election.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
Back in January 2017, only 19 minutes after Trump's inauguration, the Washington Post proclaimed, "The campaign to impeach President Trump has begun." Over the past 4 years, a hidden power has been plotting to implement schemes to oust Trump in a subversion attempt, yet each time these ended in failure. Now in 2020, we are witnessing the most serious, most widespread election fraud ever over the 244 years of American history.
We have put together, I think, the most extensive and inclusive voter fraud organization in the history of American politics.
People here right now are worried
about the integrity of the American system. They're worried right now over whether the Supreme Court will rule based on the Constitution and based on justice. They're worried that their concerns are not being heard by the people in charge of this country. We don't see any police, no riot police. People are peacefully calling for justice to be restored to this country. The year 2020. 400 years ago, the Mayflower brought the first groups of Protestants to America. The year 2020, the 244th year since the symbolic birth of the United States through the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These truths have spread worldwide, inspiring patriots and becoming universal values. The year 2020, the 233rd year since the creation of the Constitution of the United States, establishing fundamental laws and guaranteeing basic rights of citizens, including the rights to life, liberty, and private property. Yet, if the 2020 presidential election was stolen by communist forces within and outside of America, then the separation of power among the three branches of government and a fair legal system would cease to exist. The freedom to elect would cease to exist. The freedom and equality of the American people would cease to exist. It would be an attempted coup to subvert the foundations upon which the United States of America was built. Communism would slam into the United States like a tsunami. America, the beacon of democracy, would be extinguished, and the world would enter a dark age.
We are living now in a communist revolution, and 90% of Americans still don't understand this. So if this election fraud is allowed to stand, there will never be another free election in this country. Never. There will never be a chance to regain freedom.
They don't want to lose. They are 10 steps past us in every area: planning, strategizing, being purposeful, setting things up. In my heart, from studying Marxist and read all the main writings since Marx, I think they prefer if Trump is able to overturn this and they can do the revolution. They love destruction. That's the ultimate thing, like Vladimir Lenin said, we will have world communism through world revolution.
In a socialist communist society, there is no rule of law. There's only the rule of the state. So in America, you're protected by law. You can criticize the American president. You can criticize your congressman. He can't touch you because you have the First Amendment right to speak your mind. You can protect your family with your firearms. You have all sorts of legal protections. Under socialism, the only authority is the state. And the only right or wrong is what the state wants. So if you're in any way opposed to the state, if you in any way oppose the state's plans or not cooperate with the state's plans, you're an enemy of the people and you have no legal protection whatsoever. They can jail you, they can persecute you, they can take your job away, they can stop your kids going to school, they can deny you health care, they can do anything they want to you. And Americans need to understand the goal of the socialists in this country is complete tyranny.
If we just stand by and watch, what's happening in Hong Kong will be tomorrow's America.
China's parliament approved a decision to impose national security legislation on Hong Kong in a landslide vote on Thursday.
Taiwan and Hong Kong stand no chance against China without a strong, free U.S. And so we have to stand up for all of God's people of the world, not just the U.S.
Honesty should be the role. The truth should be the role. That's the thing that's missing in this country right now, is a passion for the truth.
Those people that are telling you right now that it is over are lying to you.
Every patriot should step forward. Let your voices be heard and be respected. During the American Revolution, The political philosopher and author Thomas Paine said, "These are the times that try men's souls." Today we are in such a time. In a lawsuit filed in the Supreme Court, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton wrote, "Our country stands at an important crossroads. Either the Constitution matters and must be followed, even when some officials consider it inconvenient or out of date, or it is simply a piece of parchment on display at the National Archives. We ask the court to choose the former." On one hand, the American Constitution restricts presidential authority via Congress and the courts, but it also grants presidential prerogative powers. With these prerogatives, former American presidents took many key actions during some of the nation's most difficult times, and these actions are still remembered today. President Trump has the authority to exercise the powers granted by the Constitution. Decisive emergency actions are necessary to deter this extensive attack.
We will not be tyrannized, we will not be demeaned, and we will not be intimidated by bad, evil people. It will not happen.
Defending the Constitution, defending the foundation of democracy that defines America, is the duty of the American president, of every government official, and of every American citizen. No matter whether these destructive attacks are foreign or domestic. Hear the voice of Americans who love freedom and equality as their cries for justice resound above us.
They underestimated the American people. They underestimated the people who love this country and believe in the Constitution.
We are at the most crucial juncture in the history of our country. Nothing's even been close.
The 2020 U.S. election is no longer a contest between two parties, nor a contest between Trump and Biden. It is a battle between traditional values and communism, a battle between good and evil. We are not bystanders. We all play a role.
We have 80 million strong people that say we want freedom. We want to keep America great, and it's a battle worth fighting, and it's giving us all a very meaningful life of standing for the truth.
Americans need to understand this election will decide not just who's the president, it will decide the future of America and consequently the future of the world.
What every one of us can do is to first help the people around us understand the truth about the election fraud. Please share this documentary as widely as possible. By presenting the facts, we will break through censorship, and as Americans, we will not allow our country to be subverted by communist forces. Trump is not only confronting the CCP and fighting for the American people, he is fighting for all people who value freedom, truth, and tradition. We are not fighting for Trump. We are fighting for our future and the future of American freedom.